today is going to be Viper. Let's just jump into the game, see what is happening. You have to excuse me because I'm like having a little bit of a cold today, but it still won't really stop me from analyzing these games. Hey, singing bug 007. What's up? Welcome to the new series that I'm hoping to start. The matchup is Tatars versus Vikings. Viper playing as the Tatars on the left side, Mr. MBL playing as the Vikings on the right. Both of them are so far starting to scout their bases, looking for all their sheeps. Viper has already found all his sheeps and is going to start pushing the deer. Meanwhile, MBL is taking his boar after 3 onward. Going for 3 onward kind of indicates that you're not going to go for a drush. Some people have in their repertoire of opening mana terms with 3 onward, but it's very rare for that to happen. So it feels like a much more conservative opening. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Viper also with 3 onward, which also makes me think it can either be a scout opening or archer opening, which is much more common in the modern meta now. Skipping ahead, both of them are kind of pushing the deer. Yeah, MBL decides to do basically the same thing. The score is not really changing that much. Viper pushed 2 deers and now he's onto the map trying to scout and find his opponent. Sees a bunch of deer, the relic extra gold, doesn't quite find where his opponent is. He sees the 4 tile gold and goes back to scout for his opponent. He'll probably run into this extra stone, which will give him a clear idea of where his opponent is. Meanwhile, MBL has already found Viper's base. Both of them are up at basically identical population and uptime. Meanwhile, Viper going for 2 on gold. MBL not doing anything of the sorts, which means Viper wants to play straight archers. Meanwhile, MBL with the Vikings going for scouts. It's basically the opposite now. You usually see the Tatar player wanting to play cavalry and the Viking player wanting to play archers and range units. You're seeing the exchanging of roles that these guys are doing. MBL probably feels more comfortable utilizing the Viking bonus of making a lot of farms around his town center. Meanwhile, Viper's thought process, maybe an explanation I could give behind opening straight archers nowadays is it's the safest opening against militia openings. Your archers will come onto the field. It's kind of an adaptation from the Empire War meta where straight archer seems to do really well. I should get capture edge. I like it this way. Capture edge gives you a lot of other things, but I prefer the old way of watching games on just watching it through the UI rather than using capture edge. So, as I was saying, the roles have been reversed and MBL with the initiative on the map with the scouts, and Viper still has a couple of sheeps left. Already 7 farms for MBL, dropping down his archery range. Anticipating the archers from Viper, Viper wants to move out, sends his scout and archers in the combination to go to MBL's base. The reasoning behind keeping your scout with this initial army is to pick off the skirmishes that your opponent is going to be making. And MBL should get a villager. The pathing kind of bugged out. The spearman could not get through the mining camp. MBL gets the first villager kill of the game. The 1 KD for Mr. MBL is showing that. Viper wants to get some extra scouting while he's sending his army forward. MBL already anticipating this attack, has prepared a couple of skirmishers inside his ranges, decides to release them, doesn't really know which direction Viper might come from, and wants to protect this hill because he finds it vulnerable. But meanwhile, Viper shows up over here. Quick gates being dropped so that the archers can't loop inside and guarantee that kill. This villager manages to get away. Meanwhile, the skirmishers are finally coming in. Those archers were hitting pretty hard. That means he already has fletching in place. The scouts have been pulled back to the base trying to defend against this attack. The gate has been completed. Couple of villages are being idled. If we compare the population, Mr. MBL sitting on like a 4 villager lead. I have to double check on what Viper's economy looks like. If it did not get wheelbarrow, I don't know how to explain this villager difference. This is a villager difference without having any wheelbarrow in place, which means, okay, I missed this. He killed a villager on the gold, he killed another villager on the berries, and the scout opening and the skirmisher opening from Mr. MBL is working out much more in favor of him. Viper has lost the map control, the initiative, he's behind in economy, and Viking with the faster farms that MBL made is going to give him a lot of advantage in the early game. Meanwhile, Viper, still kind of stabilizing, has finally started to drop his farms. The only advantage he has is that he's getting a small advantage in killing those two skirmishers, pulling a lot of food army from MBL. MBL is still down on food compared to Mr. Viper, who has like 400 food already. So that's the big advantage Viper has going for him. His uptime might be pretty reasonable as long as he manages to secure his base. He has like left a few gaps, is dropping a stable, maybe even for scouts in Feudal Age or knights in Castle Age. Still maintaining the hill presence, only has fletching, using the hill advantages of Tatars to camp the hill and do extra damage to these skirmishers. Even though skirmishers are a really good counter, if you micro well enough, he's trying to pick them off in lower numbers. But without any armor for the archers, this is very risky because skirmishers already have +1 armor on them. He's still trying to do his best, but this is not efficient enough of a fight to be justifying doing these moves. MBL dropping his second range. He wants to switch to archers so that he can stop making skirmishers, which will save him a bunch of food, allowing him to go up to the castle age. Viper, meanwhile, still wants to contest a little bit of the map control, makes one scout and wants to push away the skirmishers. Maybe he wants to idle his town center for the rest of the food and click up to the castle age. He has been idling quite a bit. 5 villager difference now. He lost 2 villagers and probably idled 3 villager difference, which is happening right now. MBL is still sort of away. He got the armor upgrade, which I don't think in hindsight was the best thing in the world. Because getting the armor is slowing down his uptime. Could have garrisoned this food, cancelled these 2 archers and clicked up, but not really happening right now. Viper, meanwhile, has already clicked up to the next age. This is the advantage of playing archers. Your uptime is really quick since you don't really spend any food in the beginning of the feudal age. Archer still providing a little bit of an harassment behind this wood line. MBL smartly pulls away. The scout getting as much scouting information possible, and MBL is also on his way up to the castle age. Skirmishers protecting the front. Archers going to try to deal with the raid in the back. Viper still playing kinda open, has dropped 2 archery ranges and is getting bloodlines, so which makes me think he wants to play cavalry archers. Meanwhile, MBL with a healthy mix of archers and skirmishers. How fast can you go archers against man-at-arms? You can do archers at like 19 or 20 population against man-at-arms at a pretty reasonable uptime, rendering most of the times the man-at-arm attack useless. That's the new way of playing this. A triple archery range being set up by MBL and Viper, dropping a town center immediately on this wood line. Maybe another town center on the gold. I don't think he has the resources for it. Gets Bodkin and produces 2 cavalry archers. The only vulnerable spot in the whole map for MBL is his gold mine, and he's camping it with his army. This wood line can be harassed from the back. This wood line can be harassed from the back. So maybe like a spearman which is put over here can be standing on this area, alerting Viper's attack to MBL. Skirmish is moving forward. Viper already has 3 town centers, so like he's going to try to raid with cav archers and basically buy enough time for his boom to kick up. MBL has a clear advantage right now, but to capitalize on his advantage, he needs to apply pressure. The more defensive he plays, the better chances Viper will have of coming back. So delayed fletching a blacksmith. You can most of the time get it almost immediately. Like if you most of the time don't need to do the fletching immediately. The archers are more than enough to deal with the man-at-arms. Crossbow and bodkin and skirmishers, elite skirmishers, and moving out with bodkin as well. Viper kinda expects this sort of play, is preparing a defensive mangonel to protect his economy, and MBL playing pretty slow right now. Is not really in a hurry to attack. He's playing a little bit campy, getting ballistics, going for a monastery, and this might be a one town center play from MBL. The reason he's not booming right now is like he knows like Viper has started to boom. He has a pretty good army size. If he controls this area and uses his Viking economy bonus for getting that handcart tech and banking up a lot of resources, he can get up to the Imperial Age pretty quickly. That's why these 2 extra buildings have already been placed. He needs a little bit more gold and can start idling his town center once he has enough bank of food. So defensive play from MBL, doesn't really want to move out just yet. Is keeping his skirmishes in check, added a second town center on the extra gold so that he can have a safer gold. One of the other golds is in the front. He wants to make sure that doesn't get harassed. Viper wants to attack on this side of the map with his cavalry archers. MBL doesn't really let him do that. Viper has a 20 villager lead and has put a lot of his villages on stone. Stone is a very valuable resource when you want to protect certain areas of the map. If you drop a castle on this area, this whole stone mine, the wood line, and the gold mine immediately gets protected. Viper with a small raid with his cavalry archers manages to get a villager and a couple of crossbows, pulling this army from that right side back to the main one. And I'm curious to see how he wants to respond to dealing against the faster Imperial from MBL. And going on stone kind of indicates he might do a defensive castle or defensive towers to protect his entire base. Gets into this wood line, gets a couple of villages. MBL kind of really bleeding right now. He needs all the villagers he can get out of this fast Imperial, and he can't afford losses like these because he only has a limited amount of villagers to work with compared to the booming Viper, who has a whopping 40 villager lead. So as long as he can sustain the attack from MBL's faster Imperial, I think Viper should win the game. MBL really just not really applying any pressure in the beginning of Castle Age. Was a little bit of a weird decision making. His option of going faster to Imperial Age kind of made sense in this matchup. You don't really want to play against Tatars in later stages of the game. You're much likely to have an advantage in the early Imperial where your economy kicks in with the handcart and the other resources much faster. The collection of those resources will be happening much faster than your opponents. There's the defensive castle that I talked about. This defensive castle protects the extra gold that Viper would want. Mangonel gets a hit. Half the crossbows are dead. And Imperial's still really struggling. He has not managed to move out of his base yet. These cavalry archers still getting a lot of value. Another castle protecting the entire left side of his base. If I am Viper, I would think about maybe stonewalling this choke point, which funnels all the army to this castle. MBL, meanwhile, in the front, he can damage a little bit of this area with the crossbow sitting on the farms, idling a little bit of his economy. MBL runs into that castle, goes the other direction. And am I right in assuming that about 2029 worlds is there a change in most build orders in Feudal Age? I'm not sure what that question means. Like, I don't know what you're asking me. Oh, there's the castle, which is being hurried up on that left side. That's why I said, like, a stone wall here would basically deny this raid from ever happening. The castle will go up, the arbalist should die. The castle gets most of them, and the cavalry archers also gets rid of all of them. Mangonel pushes away the remaining arbalists, and MBL is like really struggling. He's done almost no damage to Viper's economy. Viper's still sitting on a 50 villager lead. Viper wants to drop a couple of farms. Is kind of long way away from Imperial Age, but MBL was not really on stone in the early game and doesn't really have enough stone for a castle which will allow him to trip down and gain position on Viper's map. His main plan of like using the Arbalest to get a chokehold on Viper's economy has like really failed, since Viper has put down multiple castles in his economy, which allows this raid to be basically doing nothing. We can speed it up. I think Viper has this. He's still making a lot of skirmishes to push this army away, and will loses a few more arbalists trying to raid. And Viper is finally up to the Imperial Age with 125 villages, and Bill quite a bit far away. Is getting into his unique unit with a mixture of skirmishers to buy a little bit of time, and then switching eventually to his unique unit, which is going to be able to deal with basically everything. Once Viper reaches Imperial, I think MBL should call the game. Yeah, GG, well played. Like, it is always about 16, 18 on food. You go to gold and prepare to click up, since you have 10 on word and most scenarios in feudal age. Yeah. Something like 16 to 20 on food, 8 on gold, 10 on word. That is usually